The story begins with a man named Joe, who has been asleep for 500 years. When he finally wakes up, the world around him is completely unrecognizable. Human intelligence has dropped by nearly 1,000 times. All it takes is one ridiculously simple question to make Joe the smartest person alive and eventually the President of the United States. The question? If one bucket has oil and another has water, how many buckets are there in total? The answer is 2. That single correct response hadn't been given by anyone in over 100 years. This is the world of 2705. Buildings are held up by ropes. Drivers casually plunge off broken bridges. The most popular film is 90 minutes of pure garbage footage. Trash mountains the size of Everest loom over every city because nobody can figure out how to remove them. How did it come to this? It started back in our time. Educated, intelligent people focused entirely on careers and money, choosing not to have children. Meanwhile, the less intellectually gifted reproduced at massive rates. Generation after generation, average intelligence declined until almost nothing remained. The government secretly attempted to preserve smart genetics by freezing selected individuals. Joe and a woman named Rita were chosen, put into separate chambers, and sedated, meant to sleep for just 1 year. But the very next day, the scientist running the project was arrested. The lab was shut down and demolished. Since the mission was classified, almost no one knew it existed. Over centuries, debris buried the chambers completely. 500 years passed. A garbage truck accidentally triggers a collapse of the enormous junk pile, sending Joe's chamber sliding into a nearby house. The impact pops the door open, and Joe stumbles out into an incomprehensible world. The man whose house he lands in barely registers his existence, too absorbed in television. Without a second thought, he hurls Joe out the window. Joe wanders the streets in shock. Signs are crooked and misspelled. People can barely form sentences. Desperate for help, he enters a hospital. Inside, a nurse diagnoses patients by matching their faces to cartoon buttons on a board. The doctor hands Joe 3 tubes and casually mixes up which one goes where, then cheerfully suggests they swap them around. Joe bolts the moment the checkup ends. He rinses his mouth only to find the taps run green energy drink instead of water. A passerby stares at him in disbelief when Joe asks about drinking water. "Water's for cleaning toilets," the man says. Spotting a magazine, Joe checks the date. The year is 2705. He collapses in disbelief, overwhelmed by dread and loneliness. When police arrest him for skipping his hospital bill, he's hauled before a judge. His assigned defense lawyer turns out to be the same man who threw him out the window, who now argues against Joe in court. The enraged judge sentences him to 500 years in prison. Before being locked up, Joe is given a standard IQ test. The question appears: 1 bucket of oil, 1 bucket of water, how many buckets? Joe mutters 2. The machine announces he's the first person in a century to answer correctly. Joe slumps to the floor, fully realizing what he's dealing with. Thinking fast, Joe simply walks up to the prison guard and says he's supposed to be going out, not in. The guard apologetically unlocks his handcuffs and points him to the exit. Joe runs. He tracks down Rita, who has just woken from her own chamber. Together with the dim-witted lawyer named Archie, they set off to find a time machine, because surely a civilization 500 years ahead must have invented one. Along the way, Joe discovers why the nation's crops have completely failed. Farmers are watering plants with energy drinks. A powerful beverage corporation had quietly seized control of the country's entire water supply, then convinced everyone that water is harmful to health. Even baby bottles are filled with the bright green drink. Joe tries to explain that plants need water. Nobody listens. So he tries a different approach. He tells the crowd that the plants personally spoke to him and asked for water. The crowd immediately believes him. Fields across the nation switch to water. Within days, however, the drink company collapses. Thousands lose jobs, and the crops still haven't sprouted. The furious mob turns on Joe and throws him back in jail, this time chained to a massive boulder. His punishment? Survive an arena match against 3 monster trucks using only a beat-up small car and the boulder dragging behind him. The 3rd truck is so enormous it gets wedged in the entrance gate and destroys itself. Joe uses the boulder as a weapon, swinging it so the remaining 2 trucks crash into each other. Just as a terrifying executioner emerges from the wreckage to finish the job, the stadium screens light up with something extraordinary. Rita has spotted tiny green shoots breaking through the soil and broadcast the image live. The crowd's rage evaporates instantly. The president himself leaps into the arena and kicks the executioner aside. Joe is declared free, all charges dropped. When they finally reach the so-called time machine Archie had promised, it turns out to be a carnival ride that someone simply named Time Machine. There is no way home. Joe and Rita accept their fate. They settle in this broken world and build a life together. Joe's ability to grow crops earns him a reputation as a miracle worker. People call him the god of farming. He and Rita marry, have 3 children, and those children become the sharpest minds on the planet. Hope, however fragile, begins to stir. Meanwhile, Archie stumbles his way into becoming vice president and fathers 32 children, every single one confirmed to be absolutely, spectacularly clueless. So here's the final question for you. If you woke up tomorrow and discovered the entire world had lost 1,000 times its intelligence, but you remained exactly as sharp as you are today, what would you do first?